Jon Mendez here. Next to our how-tos, we've borrowed quite a nice little rib to go and do some going faster. Before we go out to sea, we need to have a little walk through the boat and make sure that we're happy that everything's secure. So I normally start at the bow and just work my way through, just checking all the essentials. So I make sure the anchor's tight, make sure my crew knows how to turn the batteries off and on, how to start and stop the engines, make sure he knows where the safety kit is. Quick walk through on the controls so he's happy and comfortable with what's happening. And then most importantly, once we set off, or before we set off, but make sure that the kill cord works correctly and it stops the engines, and having that second kill cord so that if anything happens, he can come and get me. So I always start at the bow, as it seems really logical to me. This boat's got an electric anchor winch, which is quite posh on the rib. So all I'm doing is just make sure that it's nicely secure and the safety chain is on. We don't want that coming loose at sea. So that's nice and simple. Pop the hatch back in, put the covers back in, that locks in. Inside here we've got a fire extinguisher, and then just walking aft, we'll do the console in a second, but walking aft, I'm making sure that I've got no loose lines and fenders. This morning, before my crewman arrived, and my eager cameraman, I did my little trick and pumped up all the tubes, make sure they're all a bit firm. Weather's got a bit cooler, so the pressure's dropped. And then for my crew members' benefit, in this locker we've got flares, we've got an emergency bag, we've got an emergency bailing bucket, spare lines. And then in the aft on this boat, we also have a life raft, and we've got our radar reflector. Before we started, I also did some engine checks, just the basics, make sure the props are nice and sound, no damage, check the oils on the engines. And on these, when you start them, the computer goes through a little check sequence and make sure that it's happy. So once that's all sorted, the last thing to always think about is yourself. So kitted up nicely in some decent quality foul weather gear, decent quality self-automatic life jacket. I also carry a mini EPIRB just in case I go for a swim, and a sharp knife for those little things that need fixing that always happen on a boat. Once that's all sorted, we'll go and start the engines, check the kill cord, and then we're ready for an off. When we looked at the safety gear personal wise, I always take a hat, gloves and sunglasses, and it's not looking particularly sunny, but it keeps the worst of the salt out of your eyes if you're going quickly. And if it rains, rain's really painful. So you don't want them too dark, but I find they allow me to see the waves better as well. And speaking of rain, here it comes right now. Lastly, every boat will come with one of these, some form of manual which tells you all the vitals. This one's also used for fast rib rides, and it will have important things like fuel consumption, fuel range, where things are stowed, anything you should know about the boat. It will also have its sea operating category, how rough you should go out in. And obviously that depends on three things: the quality of the boat, the quality of where you are, i.e. the conditions of the area, and your own capability. Never go out if you think it's going to be a bit more than you've ever done. So, how to start and stop the engines. It's really important that not just you on the boat know this. On this one, we have a pair of keys, because obviously we're twin engine. And being as they're fairly modern, they're electronic, so they'll go through a check process. That will show on the screen. I've already lifted the legs this morning and done a little look at the propellers and just generally to make sure there's no damage. Once the screen fires up and it shows that we're all happy, then we can turn the keys and check they start. Then we're looking for the cooling jets, very important. They don't work for very long if you don't get the water cooled. And then we'll check that the kill cord works. Whenever we go out in a boat which is open, we should be wearing the kill cord, preferably around the leg. I find that's the most satisfactory solution. It depends where it's actually fitted onto the boat, but for me, on the leg works really, really well. And you make it so that it's tight on your leg and the slack is in the cord which attacks to the thing. The other key thing is there needs to be a spare, because if the worst happens and I come out the boat, and I've been out of a boat, it's not fun, how do your crew come and get you? The kill cord's around your leg, so you need a spare. Now this fits many, but actually on this boat the fitting is on that little ring there, and Richard can come and get me because I'd be very grateful. So, first thing we're going to cover is how to go faster. How to accelerate the boat, how to get it going, how to get it nicely stable, how to trim it up a little bit, and we're going to do that for going upwind and down. The key thing on any form of open boat is the relationship between the wheel and the throttles. You need to have one hand on the wheel and one hand on the throttles all the time. If you haven't got a hand on each, you haven't really got control of the boat, so it's absolutely crucial. Make sure that kill cord's on. Make sure somebody back at base knows where you are and how long you're going to be and when you're expected back.
All of those are just sensible precautions for going boating. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring the boat gently up to just under planing speed, accelerate up onto the plane, and as soon as she comes up onto the plane I'm going to ease the throttle just a little bit, let the boat stabilise, make sure we're happy with the speed, trim up just a fraction just to get it comfy. Whenever you hear anybody talking about ribs and sports boats and bigger craft, you'll hear us talk about the trim, and what that really is your ability to adjust the fore and aft angle of the boat. Some of them allow you to adjust side to side as well, but this is really just on the outboard drive trim. And what that allows you to do is angle the angle of the leg in or out. So when the boat is stationary, the angle of the leg is pretty much horizontal, it's tucked in a slight bit, and that means the thrust of the propeller is horizontal. What happens is as the boat accelerates and the bow rises, that drive is now pointing towards the seabed, and we need to raise it up to a horizontal level to give us the best possible efficiency, or even slightly above horizontal. The problem with that is that it makes the bow of the boat rise, so it's always a balance between raising the bow to reduce the wetted area and get the most speed, and dropping the trim, which allows us to force the bow down and make the boat's shape cut through the waves. So as a general principle, when we're going downwind we trim up, and when we're going upwind we trim down. That's the basics. You'll see me fiddle with the trim. On this boat it's on the side of the throttle, and that does both of the engines together. I also have individual buttons which allow me to trim one or the other. If we had a beam seat I might trim up a little bit more on one side to keep the boat reasonably flat. The other thing that affects the trim, which you can control, is where the people sit in the boat. So if we all sat on one side, we'd have heeled the boat over and induced the trim all of our own. So what we play with on the trim on the boat is fore and aft in general, downwind trim up, upwind trim down. Ready to start, I'm going to be going downwind. So first thing we're going to do is make sure the engines are trimmed fully down. That gives me maximum grip. The propellers are immersed as deeply as possible in the water. And then we're just going to pop it into gear. And these electronic throttles have quite a long travel before much happens. So we're just gently bringing them forward. And we're just getting it really trolling speed. And then next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have a huge look round to make sure that I'm not in the way of anything, because that's kind of polite and very, very sensible. And then just going to bring the throttles forward. And what I do is I balance the heel of my hand on the throttle box so that I've got something to pivot on. And you'll see I just wiggle my hand so that I'm not shoving it, I'm just bringing those revs up. And you'll feel the boat just starting to plane. It's just starting to move there. And that's nice and gently, that's 15 knots or so, so we're almost planing. A little bit of wash from some traffic that went through. And then a little bit more throttle, and you'll see she just gently starts to lift that bow. And now I'm going to use the trim to just gently lift the bow a little bit more. And I don't know if you could see that, the bow lifted quite nicely. And we're just easing the revs up little by little until we get the boat in a really nice stable attitude. So she's nicely balanced, good grip, nice and easy. 20 knots, no drama, really nice and civilised, and the bow's lifted so we're not getting bounced around as much. Now to slow down, most important, again have a really good look round, and then just gently, as you start to ease the throttles, remember that trim back down, a little bit more bump over this side, start to trim back down, keep easing. I'm easing nice and gently because we've generated a big wave and we don't want that to catch us up and push us. Just coming back down to our tick over, back to just our neutral position and out of gear. Now, having done downwind, the key there was get the boat gently riding, lift the bow so we're riding on the back of those little waves and just glide forward. It's very pleasant going downwind. Going upwind is a little bit more interesting. Got a stiff breeze here. We're in reasonably flat water, but there's definitely a stiff breeze. So you might need to excuse the audio a bit, because as I travel up to my 20 knots, we've got about 20 knots of wind. That makes 40 knots in total, and the mic will struggle. So might the cameraman. So our technique is very similar. Pop it in gear, bring the revs up till we're almost planing, and then push a little bit more power on. Now this time we don't need to trim up nearly so much because we want the shape of that bow cutting through those waves, and that's going to be crucial. Having my hand pivoting on the throttle is crucial as well, so if there's a slightly bigger wave I can gently ease or apply more power to go over the shape. So we'll start with into gear and just bring it up to a steady 1,000 or so, just get the boat moving. Again, same process, really good look round, make sure we're not in anyone's way. Bring the revs gently up. And you'll see the motion's much more dramatic. Trimming up just a fraction now, only a little bit to give me the drive. That's the same 20 knots. And as you can see, my poor cameraman hanging on for dear life, and everything is more dramatic. I only got small waves here, and I'm conscious that the boat's very capable, but I've still got to keep my eye on those waves so that I can ease if there's anything larger. Just coming to a slightly flatter patch, and then same process to slow down. Trim her gently down, start to ease the power back, nice and gently. Good look behind, all clear, and you'll see my wake start to dissipate. And what I want is I just slow so that as I ease that throttle for the last little bit, I'm not being pushed forward by the wake I've generated. If you slow too quickly, that wake will pick you up and shove you forward. Back into neutral, and as I slowed, I've trimmed all the way down again.
So quick conclusion, going faster, accelerating and decelerating the boat is all about that relationship between hand on throttle, hand on wheel. Crucially important to kill cords on all the time. When you're going downwind, we're trimming the bow up. Be careful not to trim too high, you'll hear the engine note change. Trim it back down when you start to slow down. Going upwind, we only trim up a little bit. We need the boat flat and the shape of the boat cutting. Again, we trim all the way back down as we slow. Slow gently so the wash doesn't catch you up. Go and enjoy.